What about now?
I hear you now.
Okay.
There we
Ladies
go.
and gentlemen, now we're live. Welcome back to Deal Flow Live. This is the show where we talk all thing business transactions, buying and selling businesses, and everything related and that goes into that. And today we're covering a special topic. We're talking about, is buying a business as easy as they really say it is? And we're going to get a little bit into the weeds on the 5 things that you need to have prepared and think about if you're going to buy a business. So comment if you have other questions about what we're saying, tune in and let us know what you're thinking. But we're going to cover the 5 things that you should be thinking about.
And realistically, there's a lot more. We're just trying to make sure it's a bite-sized list. I promise future episodes will dive deeper into what actually the process looks like, especially for people who are thinking, oh, I should just buy a business.
Exactly. This is by no means an extensive list. This is just kind of the 5 that came to mind. These 5 are pretty deep and broadly encompassing too. But the first thing is financing. You got to think about the financing. How are you actually going to fund the purchase of this business?
It's one of the things that we all get stuck into, is that we look at a business and we think, oh great, it's making $100,000 SDE and the price tag is like $300,000, and you're like, damn, I don't have $300,000 on me. Now you don't need to, obviously there are loans, but you have to be a loanable person. The bank or the lending provider has to decide that you are someone who they can trust with the money. And what people also don't consider is that the bigger the business, the more that they're going to weight that on the business rather than the person. So like you had an experience like this actually with your SBA financing, where it kind of went away because of the business size, not because you weren't going to be a bad fit.
Yeah, it was just too small of a business. Weirdly enough, they're actually a lot stricter on these smaller businesses, because from a risk standpoint, which is the biggest thing that they're thinking of, there's a higher likelihood. Excuse me. First sneeze on the live show, actually, I think. Little milestone there.
Big one for us.
There's a high likelihood that a small business is going to fail if things change. So if there's an ownership change, there's just a high likelihood of failure. So it's actually more difficult to get an SBA loan on a business that's doing, say, $100,000 a year in cash flow than it is to get one on a business doing $1 million or $1.5 million in cash flow. That being said, the SBA is kind of a crapshoot right now. It's very difficult to get an SBA loan just in general. So it's a much more difficult route of financing. But even if you can qualify and can get one, have the right business, the right experience, and some of the things that we're going to talk about, part of the financing is that you have to have a pretty hefty down payment. And a lot of the shifting that the SBA has done recently is towards funding a smaller amount of multiple. So they might only fund up to a 2 or 3 times multiple on the profit of a business. For some bigger businesses, they want a 4 times multiple or more. And if they want that 4 times multiple, the SBA only says we'll fund up to 2.5, then your down payment's going to be a lot bigger than 10%. It might end up being like 30, 40, 45% of the business of what they're buying it for. That's a much different picture. And you got to have that cash on hand, or you've got to go raise that cash or find some other way to make it happen. So it forces buyers in this environment to get a lot more creative. So the financing is, it's like the first thing you have to think of.
That's why it's top of the list.
That's why it's top of the list. You're going to have it no matter what business you acquire.
It's probably the most simplified and overlooked one that we get on here, but I think the second one is particularly important, that it almost falls further than the list, I think, for a lot of people. But for us, it's second. It's the actual financial planning of how you're going to use the loan. It's easy to say, take money, buy business, profit. But what's your strategic growth lookout with the amount of money that's already cash flowing in the business? Are you taking it all for your SDE, trying to pocket it? Are you going to reinvest it? What's your financial goals and what's your financial plan for the business's sustained growth over time? That's what people kind of think of, or at least what we find a lot of people think of when they're already deep in it and it's been a while and they're like, oh no, I've just been taking all this cash home.
Yeah, you've got to have sound projections of like the cash flow versus any debt service that you have to pay back. So if you do end up taking a loan of some kind, whether it's a personal loan from a friend or family member, whether it's an SBA loan, whether it's some other kind of loan, some kind of hard money loan or something, whatever that looks like, you have to think about, okay, what are my monthly payments and yearly payments going to look like for this business, and how much cash flow is it making? And if there's a razor thin margin there of like the amount of cash flow it tends to pull in versus how much you're going to pay back, it's very dangerous. If things change much, you might end up not being able to make your payments and maybe ruining a relationship or defaulting on a loan, or worse. And so you got to have those sound kind of projections, and it's got to make financial sense in that way. So aside from just having the financing, it's, does this deal make financial sense? Is it going to pan out in the future? And not just based on what is this business doing historically, but what is it likely to continue to do under new ownership?
Market research is something that's often overlooked and not talked about as much. And I think it's very important that you talk to people who are in the field or are working with businesses in that field about what they see, trends, about how they feel the market's moving, and the buyers and the sellers are reacting to it. So always a thing that people need to consider when they're looking into their financial plan with their business, for sure.
We have a comment from a viewer, one Grant Barnes, good friend of the show. Says Ryan is looking jacked in that polo.
Oh, thanks, Grant.
He said the gun show is back in town.
Oh yeah, it's my Grant Barnes official polo. Look jacked today for the low price of whatever Grant wants to sell it to you for.
You do look jacked, by the way.
Which I think, just like Grant, we do have Grit on here, which are basically one and the same. I don't think anybody has more grit than Grant.
Yep, that's our third item on the list. This is one of the most important ones. I don't want to discount any of these five as being less important than the other, but grit. This is one of those qualities. It's like, it doesn't fit into a profit and loss statement. It doesn't fit into a set of financial projections. It doesn't fit into like an SBA loan calculator. There's no way to really quantify grit. It's something you kind of have to have a sense for. And if you're the one buying the business, taking on this risk, taking on this venture, or if you're betting on someone who is buying a business in some way, whether that's selling them your business and having some skin in the game still, or it's investing in someone buying a business, that person better have grit, because things are going to get hard. They're going to be, in any business that you buy, there's going to be skeletons in the closet that come out that make things more complicated, more difficult. Sometimes things that can be even spirit crushing and make things way more difficult than you expected. And whoever's at the helm better have a lot of grit and ability to continue moving forward in the face of adversity, or they're just not going to make it.
I think that's a very key indicator, and you don't really know you have it until you're in the moment of it. Maybe you've had, everybody's had flashes of it in their life. And I don't think that this is a one-to-one with the hustle grind set type of motivational speech stuff. That's more of a performative thing, in my opinion. Grit is when the month has been bad. You've had a streak of you had a streak of bad days. Payrolls, you got to make payroll. You're worried that you're going to be able to pay yourself at the end of the day. You got the debts, you got the stuff. Are you still showing up and giving, your best effort and believing that you can turn this around and figuring it out? Or are you folding on yourself and just being like, well, it's washed, forget it, I'm done? That's the sort of people that you look for in business that you want to partner with. And that's the sort of person that you're going to have to be or become to be in a business. I think we all know people who work in businesses that are successful, and we've all seen that roller coaster of emotion they've gone through. And even the most successful ones will have streaks where it's just like, oh my God, what the heck is happening? It was so good. Buckle in, we got to get through it. And I think that's what we admire and what we kind of want to put ourselves through, in a sense, to prove that we can make it to the other side. Because you got livelihoods on your hands when you're running a business. If you're not losing sleep over the fact that you are making or breaking somebody's entire life based on your own ability to drive the ship, I mean, you're not really taking this seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you've got massive overhead in the way of like base salaries, people who's like you said, their entire livelihood is depending on the business and maybe has been for a long time, and all of a sudden you're buying into that and you're responsible for whether or not that continues, whether or not they still can take home a paycheck and feed their family. It's a massive weight to carry. And if you add that to maybe being levered up a little bit with like some debt service, and then maybe having a slow season that you didn't plan on, that's a tough thing to go through. That's very, very difficult. And things are always going to happen that are unexpected and that you didn't plan for. So if you haven't shown yourself the ability to prove that grit through some other life factors, then you're probably not ready for buying a business yet.
If you look at a business and you think about everything that we just said and you're like, nah, I'm good, I got this, probably don't buy a business. If you didn't have any stress or anxiety or fear when we went through this stuff, you probably are more adept at buying it because you felt it and you probably have felt it at some point. So that's usually when it's like, if you can feel those emotions and you can like sit with it, more likely I'm a bet on that person than I am the person's like, whatever, I got it, no worries.
Mm-hmm. So grit, massively important quality. And the last one that we have is licensing. This is one that it's not necessarily going to be needed for every single type of business that you require or that you try to acquire, but it is something that's often overlooked, and we see it kill deals a lot. It's a lot of times it's one of those things that is kind of an afterthought, and someone gets down the road of potentially buying this business, and then all of a sudden they find out, oh, I don't have the license that I would need to have to buy this business and to own it. And the person who is selling it to me or considering selling it to me would be taking that license with them and doesn't want to be involved in the business anymore. And so what do? You just all of a sudden you have an illegal business. You can't do that. So that's something you have to plan on. You have to kind of like have that licensing coming into it. We skipped one thing that is going to kind of tie into this.
Yeah, I was going to say we got that final statement to roll back on.
But the licensing, the trades are very popular businesses. We talk about things like HVAC, plumbing, electrical, especially HVAC because that's the field that I'm in now. We talk about these all the time, and those are businesses that require licensure. Like the business that I own now, we have a mechanical license that covers that business. And that's a pretty major license. It's not easy to get. It's quite difficult. We have someone on staff that's like basically studying to take it right now. And it's like I think it's 2 8-hour like major exams that you have to take, like 2 8-hour long exams that you have to take for it. So it's no joke. It's not just something that you can walk into a testing center and just nail and be ready just because you
can't do 100 hours on a Kaplan prep review and be like, yeah, I'm good. No, mm-hmm. This is serious knowledge.
Yeah, the guy that is looking at taking this exam on our staff has been working in this business for 8 years. I mean, it's just now something that he's taking seriously and thinks he's qualified for. So it's really no joke, and that's something you have to think of. It's not something you have to have personally. There are other ways around it. But you need to look into what the requirements are for this individual type of business that you're buying and figure out how you would be carrying that license. And what does that look like? Does that look like retaining the previous owner in some kind of equity formation? Does it look like paying them $500 a month to retain that license on the business?
Which also depends on your loan. If you do an SBA, they will not allow that. So you have to also research into that legality as well.
Exactly. So it's definitely something you need to think of. And something that often comes with having a license is our last thing on the list, which is transferable experience.
Yeah.
That one's kind of important.
Yeah. Now, you don't have to be an HVAC tech to run an HVAC business, but you should understand the basic principles of running a business and have experience in business to some degree. I mean, you had business in both upper levels of finance and marketing. Grant has been a fantastic salesperson his entire life and also very good at marketing as well. So when you guys came into your business, it was very much a natural match made in heaven because they weren't having trouble with the actual repairs and the service. Mm-hmm.
They're fantastic at the service.
Yeah, they were great at what they were doing, but the other part of doing what you're doing is the managing the business thing. So having the in of people who wanted you there and having already getting the team behind you and being like, well, they don't do the job, but they make sure that we get more jobs. is really key. You need to know how to do that. If you're coming in to buy a business, you're basically telling people, hey, I'm going to improve this and make things easier on you so you guys can do the things that you're good at and don't have to worry about any of this.
Exactly. And I think that transferable experience is something you just kind of have to do like an honest assessment of. The only way I found to try to kind of get an assessment of whether what you have is going to carry over is to start interviewing some people that are already working in that space. Before Grant and I ever acquired this HVAC business, we met and sat down with probably 20 other HVAC business owners, maybe more than that, between HVAC and a few other trades. And we really got a sense of like, what is it like running a business like this? What does that background look like? And we found that there was, like, many of them did come from working in the trades and worked their way up there, but there was also some out there that were business people that got into this and decided to acquire a business like that, and they were doing well as well. And so that told us, okay, well, this seems like we could have some success with this. There's some precedent there. But we had those kind of fundamental skills of sales, marketing, just being an operator. That's kind of a word that's getting tossed around these days. I think it's a very valuable one, just being an actual operator and just kind of having that skill of like figuring out whatever you need to keep the business running and keep the doors open, is an essential one.
Because odds are most of the people in that business don't want to bother with that stuff because it's, not as fun to them.
Well, you become a filter as a business owner. You become a filter for all of the biggest, hairiest, nastiest problems that no one wants to solve or knows how. And so you just got to be prepared to deal with those all the time. And those, usually you can only solve those if you have some kind of experience to bring to the table.
Yeah, nobody ever kind of appreciates it until you get higher up and more responsibility about how many layers there are until things get to somebody. So, my mother is a great business owner, and she's very good at trying to build more ways to give more people opportunities to earn more and be more involved with the business, but also to get layers in front of her. It's inevitable, though, that at some point something is going to get all the way up the chain. Not because they jump ship, but because there's just every layer gets through and they're like, we don't know. She's been doing this for like 30 something years. There will always be something that gets hairier. And sometimes it's the people that you brought into those levels that become the hairy thing at some point. So
sure, often is.
You have to, like we said, you have to have that grit and just be able to push through and get through it and understand that it's not, it's not the end. It's just, you need to do a solution.
But those 5 things are a pretty good starting point to have like a good idea of whether you could buy a business. If you don't have all 5 of those in check, I definitely would not recommend trying to buy one. I would say go back to the drawing board a little bit, try to figure out how to acquire those 5 things, whether that looks like getting more experience, going out and learning a little bit more about how this stuff works, and being a little bit more well structured on the deal you're putting together or what kind of financing you're bringing together. Maybe it's just developing some grit, going through some harder stuff like before you try to do something like this.
Just wondering if you want to even really take on all that responsibility.
Yeah. Maybe you hear these 5 things and you say, I don't know, that sounds a little bit too much for me. And that's okay. Not everyone's cut out for this.
There's people who are making less than there's a lot of people doing jobs that are 9 to 5 or salaried positions that are making great money, having none of the stress that business owners have. So there are plenty of opportunities out there, frankly, to make good money. And it doesn't mean you have to buy a business. So don't believe this is the only way to get yourself out of, to make more money.
That's right. Any parting notes that you would say aside from those 5?
I would say I hope that if there's anything you took away from this, it is that it is not just simply going to the business store and asking for 1 business, please. And it's just not going out and having a bunch of cash. And secondly, if you don't think you have all these things, but you're getting people offering to sell you a business, or they're saying, don't worry, we can figure it out, don't walk away from that person. We know many good brokers, and they vet the people buying it just as hard as they vet the people that they're representing. So I think if you are lacking those, a good broker will probably tell you, hey, this is not going to be the right thing for you. You should probably come back later.
Yep, I think that's right. And if you found any of this insightful, if you are someone who's looking to buy a business, you're trying to acquire something or do some kind of equity deal, we run a weekly call every Wednesday night that you can join. You can find it at the link in the description here, or usually in the link of any other videos that we have. Check it out, see if it's a good fit for you. We help you kind of walk through finding a deal, structuring one, and negotiating it. Mostly work on off-market deals. So if that's a fit for you, join there. We'll love to see you on it. In the meantime, see you next Tuesday, right around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Deal Flow Live.